The billionaire CEO attended his mom's award ceremony. Couldn't believe the chief guest was his ex with a boy. Ethan grabbed her arm just as she reached the door. Danielle, wait. That boy. Is he mine? She turned slowly. Her eyes held no fear. No apology. Just years of silence finally given a voice. You left, Ethan. You made your choice. You don't get to ask that question now. His jaw tightened. I deserve to know. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper that could shatter glass. You deserved a lot of things. So did I. The difference is, I stopped waiting for them. She pulled her arm free and walked out without looking back. That satisfying moment did not happen overnight. It started 3 hours earlier, inside a ballroom filled with applause, cameras, and one man who believed the evening belonged to him. Sit back and let me tell you a story. The Grand Westbrook Hotel stood like a monument to old money and new ambition. Its marble floors had witnessed power deals, political handshakes, and tonight, it would witness something far more personal. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that stretched toward heaven, casting warm golden light across 500 guests dressed in their finest. Waiters glided between tables carrying champagne flutes that sparkled like liquid diamonds. The air smelled of expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and the unmistakable scent of people who believed they mattered. Ethan Walker stepped out of his black Bentley and adjusted his cufflinks. They were platinum, custom-made, engraved with his initials. A small detail, but details mattered to Ethan. Details were what separated men like him from men who dreamed of being like him. He was 36 years old, 6'2", dark hair swept back with precision, a jaw that photographers loved and competitors feared. His suit cost more than most people earned in 3 months, but he wore it like a second skin. Comfortable, natural, as if he had been born wearing tailored fabric and polished shoes. Tonight was his mother's night. Victoria Walker was receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award for her decades of philanthropy. Hospitals bore her name. Schools existed because of her donations. Orphanages thrived under her patronage. She was, by all accounts, a remarkable woman. And Ethan intended to stand beside her, smile for the cameras, and remind everyone that the Walker legacy was in capable hands. His assistant, Marcus, walked 2 steps behind him. Sir, the seating arrangement has been confirmed. You are at the main table with your mother, the governor, and 3 board members from the foundation. Ethan nodded without turning. And the press? Controlled. Only approved journalists. No ambush questions about the Henderson acquisition. Good. They entered the ballroom through a side door reserved for VIPs. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Ethan was used to both. He had learned long ago that attention was currency, and he was wealthy beyond measure in that regard. Victoria Walker sat at the center table, resplendent in a deep burgundy gown that complemented her silver hair. At 63, she carried herself with the grace of a woman who had survived loss, rebuilt empires, and never once apologized for her strength. When she saw her son approaching, her face softened into a genuine smile. Ethan, you came. He leaned down and kissed her cheek. Did you doubt me? Never. But I know how busy you are. The company does not run itself. Tonight, the company can wait. This is your moment. Victoria touched his hand. There was warmth there, but also something else. A flicker of concern that Ethan chose not to notice. Sit. The program will begin soon. They have arranged quite the lineup of speakers. Ethan took his seat and scanned the room. Politicians, business leaders, society figures. Everyone who mattered in this city had gathered under one roof to celebrate his mother. He allowed himself a moment of pride. This was his world. These were his people. And everything was exactly as it should be. Or so he thought. The master of ceremonies took the stage. He was a polished man in his 50s with a voice made for radio and a smile made for television. He welcomed the guests, praised the foundation, and listed Victoria Walker's achievements with the reverence usually reserved for saints. Ethan half listened. He had heard these speeches before. Different words, same sentiment. His mother was wonderful. His mother was generous. His mother deserved every accolade the world could offer. All true. All expected. Then the MC said something that made Ethan's blood run cold. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to introduce our chief guest for this evening. She is a woman whose story embodies everything this foundation represents. From humble beginnings, she has risen to become one of the most influential voices in child advocacy and education reform. Her organization has built schools in 12 countries and provided scholarships to over 10,000 underprivileged children. She has been featured in Time magazine, spoken at the United Nations, and tonight, she will share her journey with us. Please welcome Dr. Danielle Carter. The applause began, but Ethan did not hear it. He heard only the rushing of blood in his ears, the sudden acceleration of his heart, the crack of something breaking inside his chest that he thought he had buried years ago. Danielle. No, it could not be. He turned toward the stage, and there she was, walking with purpose, head held high, a dress of deep emerald green that flowed around her like water. Her hair was longer now, falling past her shoulders in soft waves. Her face had matured, but the features were unmistakable. The high cheekbones, the full lips, the eyes that had once looked at him with love, then with hurt, and finally with nothing at all. She was more beautiful than he remembered, more composed, more everything. And she was walking toward the microphone as if she owned the room. If you are feeling the tension building, hit that like button right now and make sure you are subscribed because this story is about to take turns you will not see coming. Ethan's throat went dry. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He tried to look away, but his body refused to obey. Every step she took was a hammer blow to the fortress he had built around his memories. Danielle reached the podium. She smiled at the audience, and the room responded with warmth. They adored her already. He could see it in their faces. She had that effect on people. She always had. But there was something different now. Something he could not name. She carried herself with an authority that went beyond confidence. This was not the Danielle he had left behind. This was someone new. Someone forged by experiences he knew nothing about. And then he saw the boy. A child, no more than 7 years old, sitting in the front row. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the edges. A small suit that made him look both adorable and serious. He watched Danielle with unmistakable devotion, his little hands folded in his lap, his eyes never leaving her face. Ethan's world tilted. The boy's features were striking. The shape of his face, the line of his jaw, something in the way he held himself. Familiar. Too familiar. Victoria noticed her son's sudden stillness. She followed his gaze to the stage, then to the child, and her expression flickered with something unreadable. Ethan, are you all right? He did not answer. He could not. Because in that moment, Ethan Walker, the man who controlled boardrooms and commanded empires, realized that he controlled nothing at all. The past had just walked onto the stage, and it had brought a question he was not prepared to answer. Danielle began to speak. Her voice was calm, measured. Each word carried weight without effort. Good evening, everyone. I am deeply honored to be here tonight, celebrating the incredible legacy of Victoria Walker. Her work has touched countless lives, including my own in ways she may never know. She paused, letting the words settle. I was not born into privilege. I grew up in a small apartment with a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table. Education was my lifeline. Every book I read, every lesson I learned, was a step toward a life I could only dream of. And tonight, I stand before you as proof that dreams, when nurtured with opportunity, can become reality. The audience was captivated. Ethan watched their faces transform from polite attention to genuine engagement. She had them, completely, but he barely heard her words. His eyes kept drifting to the boy. Who was he? Whose child was he? Why was he sitting in the front row as if he belonged there? The questions circled like vultures, and Ethan had no answers. I want to share a story with you, Danielle continued. A story about a young woman who once believed that love and success could coexist without sacrifice. She was wrong. Ethan's chest tightened. She learned that some people will always choose ambition over connection, power over partnership. And when faced with that truth, she had 2 options. She could crumble, or she could build. Danielle's eyes swept the room. For one heart-stopping second, they landed on Ethan. He felt it. The recognition, the acknowledgement, the absolute refusal to look away first. Then she continued as if nothing had happened. She chose to build, not with bitterness, but with purpose, not with revenge, but with resilience. And today, that young woman stands before you, not as a victim of circumstance, but as an architect of change. The applause was thunderous. Ethan did not clap. He could not move, because he knew exactly who that young woman was. And he knew exactly which man had forced her to choose between crumbling and building. Him. The ceremony continued, but Ethan experienced it through a haze. Speakers came and went. Awards were presented. Photographs were taken. He smiled when required, nodded when expected, and played his role with mechanical precision. But inside, chaos reigned. 8 years. It had been 8 years since he last saw Danielle Carter. 8 years since he ended their relationship with words that still echoed in his memory. I cannot build an empire and build a life with you. Something has to give, and it cannot be my future. She had looked at him with those beautiful eyes, and he had watched something die in them. Not dramatically, not with tears or screaming, just a quiet extinction, like a candle running out of wick. She had nodded once, picked up her bag, and walked out of his apartment. And he had let her go, because he believed that success required sacrifice, that love was a distraction, that he could always find someone else when the time was right. What he never considered was that she might become someone extraordinary without him, someone who did not need him, someone who had moved so far beyond his reach that he could not even see where she ended and the horizon began. Now here she was, Dr. Danielle Carter, chief guest at his mother's ceremony, the woman delivering the keynote to an audience that included the man who once dismissed her as a complication. The irony was not lost on him. When the formal program concluded, the reception began. Guests mingled. Conversations flowed. Wine glasses clinked in celebration of Victoria Walker's legacy. Ethan found himself rooted near his mother's table, watching Danielle from across the room. She was surrounded by admirers. Board members wanted her attention. Journalists wanted quotes. Everyone wanted a piece of the woman who had captured the room with nothing but her story and her presence. And then there was the boy. He stayed close to her side, but not in a clingy way. He observed the adults around him with intelligent eyes that seemed too old for his young face. Occasionally, Danielle would place a hand on his shoulder or lean down to whisper something in his ear. He would nod solemnly, as if they were partners in some secret mission. The intimacy between them was unmistakable. Victoria approached her son with 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to him and took a sip from the other. You have been staring at her for the past hour. Ethan accepted the glass, but did not drink. You knew? It was not a question. Victoria sighed. I knew she was the chief guest. I did not know your history until I saw your face when she walked on stage. Why did you not warn me? Would it have changed anything? Would you have stayed home, hidden from your past like a coward? The word stung, but Ethan could not argue. His mother had always seen through him in ways that others could not. Who was the boy, he asked. Victoria was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. That is not my story to tell. If you want answers, you will have to ask her yourself. She will not talk to me. Then perhaps you should consider why that is. Victoria touched his arm gently, the way she used to when he was a child facing something difficult. I raised you to be strong, Ethan. But strength without accountability is just stubbornness wearing a better suit. Whatever happened between you and that woman, it is not finished. I can see it in both of your faces. She walked away before he could respond, leaving him alone with his champagne and his questions. Across the room, Danielle excused herself from a conversation and led the boy toward the terrace. Ethan watched them go, his feet moving before his brain gave permission. He followed. The terrace overlooked a garden that the hotel maintained with obsessive precision. Hedges trimmed to geometric perfection. Flowers arranged by color and season. Stone pathways that led to fountains and benches designed for quiet contemplation. Danielle stood near the railing, her back to the ballroom. The boy sat on a bench nearby, kicking his feet gently and looking up at the stars. Ethan stepped through the glass doors. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of roses and the distant sound of traffic. Danielle did not turn around, but her posture shifted almost imperceptibly. She knew he was there. You always did prefer watching from a distance, she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, as if they were old acquaintances meeting at a party rather than former lovers navigating a minefield of unspoken history. Ethan walked closer. Danielle. She turned then, faced him fully. Up close, he could see the subtle lines that time had etched around her eyes. The maturity that had replaced youthful uncertainty. The absolute composure of a woman who had learned to stand alone. Ethan, it has been a long time. 8 years. You kept count. Some things are hard to forget. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a scientist might study a specimen. You look well. Success agrees with you. So does it with you. Dr. Carter, United Nations speaker. Time magazine feature. You have been busy. Busy surviving. Busy building. Busy becoming someone I could respect when I looked in the mirror. The words landed like carefully aimed arrows. Not aggressive, but precise. Ethan gestured toward the bench where the boy sat watching them with curious eyes. Who is he? Danielle's expression did not change, but something in her stance hardened. His name is Martin. That is not what I asked. That is the answer I am giving. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Neither moved. Neither looked away. The boy, Martin, slid off the bench and walked toward them. He stopped beside Danielle and looked up at Ethan with frank appraisal. "Mom, is this someone important?" "Mom." The word hit Ethan like a physical blow. Danielle placed her hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is someone I knew a long time ago. We were just saying hello." Martin considered this. He looks nervous. Adults often are when they meet people from their past. The boy nodded as if this made perfect sense. Then he looked at Ethan again. "My mom says the past is just a place where we learn things. It is not where we live anymore." Ethan stared at the child. His child? The math worked. The features were suggestive. But Danielle's expression gave nothing away. "Your mother is very wise," Ethan said finally. "I know." Marcus smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something achingly innocent. "She is the smartest person I know." Danielle smoothed her son's hair. "Why don't you go inside and find Miss Patricia? She said she would save you some chocolate cake." The boy's eyes lit up. "Really? Really? But only one slice." "Okay." He bounded toward the ballroom doors, all childhood energy and chocolate anticipation. The moment he disappeared inside, the air between Ethan and Danielle changed. Heavier. More dangerous. "Ask," she said quietly. "Is he mine?" The question hung in the darkness like a blade waiting to fall. Danielle did not flinch. She looked at him steadily, and in her eyes, Ethan saw something he had not expected. Not anger, not accusation, just a profound and weary patience. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters." "Why? Because you suddenly want to be a father? Because your conscience has developed 8 years too late? Or because you cannot stand the thought that something in this world might exist without your knowledge and control?" Each question was a scalpel, cutting through his defenses with surgical precision. "I have a right to know," he said. "You have rights." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Ethan, you forfeited your rights when you walked away. When you told me that I was a distraction from your ambitions. When you made it clear that there was no room in your empire for anything as inconvenient as love. I was young. I was stupid. You were cruel. And the worst part is, you did not even realize it. You thought you were being practical. Strategic. You treated me like a variable in an equation that needed balancing, and when I did not fit, you eliminated me." Now the anger surfaced. Not explosive, but cold. Controlled. The anger of someone who had processed their pain and emerged stronger. "I built my life without you," she continued. "I raised my son without you. I became someone without you. And now you stand here asking questions as if the answers belong to you. I just want the truth. The truth is that Martin is my son. He is healthy, he is happy, and he is loved. Everything else is irrelevant." "Not to me." Danielle stepped closer. Close enough that he could see the fire in her eyes. Close enough to smell the perfume she wore, different from the one he remembered, but somehow still her. "Then let me make something very clear. Whatever happened between us ended the night you chose to kick me away. I do not owe you explanations. I do not owe you access. And I certainly do not owe you the closure you should have sought years ago." She stepped back, smoothing her dress with hands that betrayed no tremor. "I am here tonight because your mother is a remarkable woman who has done genuine good in this world. Her foundation helped fund the first school my organization built. I admire her. I respect her. This evening is about celebrating her legacy, not relitigating our history." Ethan felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Every response he prepared dissolved before he could voice it. She had changed so fundamentally that his old strategies were useless. "Danielle, I am not asking for forgiveness." "Good. Because I did not offer any. I just want a chance to talk. Really talk. Not here, not in stolen moments. Somewhere we can have an actual conversation." She studied him for a long moment. The terrace was quiet except for the distant music from the ballroom and the whisper of wind through the garden. "Why?" "Because I have spent 8 years building things that do not matter. Companies, portfolios, reputations. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to build something real. And you think I can remind you? I think you already have. Just by standing on that stage. Just by becoming everything I was too blind to see you could be." Something flickered in her eyes. Not softening exactly, but perhaps a crack in the armor. A moment of recognition that beneath his polished exterior, there might be something genuine. Before she could respond, the terrace doors opened. Martin emerged, chocolate smeared gloriously across his face, followed by a harried-looking woman in her 40s. "Mom, Miss Patricia said I could have 2 slices because I used my good manners." The tension shattered. Danielle's face transformed from guarded adversary to loving mother in the space of a heartbeat. I see that. And I see that more chocolate ended up on your face than in your mouth. She pulled a handkerchief from her clutch and knelt to wipe his cheeks. The gesture was so tender, so unconsciously maternal, that Ethan felt something twist painfully in his chest. This was what he had given up. Not just a woman, but a future, a family, a life that could have been his if he had been wise enough to choose it. The woman, presumably Miss Patricia, apologized profusely. I am so sorry, Dr. Carter. He was very convincing. He gets that from his mother, Danielle said with a small smile. She stood and took Martin's hand. We should head back inside. They will be cutting the celebration cake soon, and we should be there for Mrs. Walker. She looked at Ethan one last time. Her expression was unreadable. Goodbye, Ethan. It sounded final. She led her son back into the ballroom, and Ethan stood alone on the terrace, surrounded by roses and the weight of his own choices. Take a moment right now to comment below. What do you think is going to happen next? And while you are at it, share this video with someone who needs to hear a story about second chances and the prices we pay for our choices. Inside the ballroom, the celebration continued. Victoria Walker stood beside a towering cake decorated with the foundation's logo, surrounded by board members and well-wishers. Cameras flashed. Toasts were made. The evening proceeded exactly as planned. But Ethan moved through it like a ghost. He smiled. He nodded. He shook hands and accepted congratulations on his mother's behalf. But his mind was elsewhere, replaying every word Danielle had spoken, analyzing every gesture, searching for meaning in pauses and inflections. The boy, Martin, his features, his age, and his existence. Everything pointed toward a truth that Ethan was not ready to face, yet could not escape. At some point during the evening, he found himself standing near the bar, nursing a whiskey he did not taste. The bartender was young, eager to please, probably working to pay for college. Rough night, sir. Ethan looked at him. What makes you say that? You have been staring at that glass for 10 minutes without drinking. Either you hate whiskey, or something heavy is on your mind. The observation was surprisingly astute. The second one, Ethan admitted. Woman trouble? Something like that. The bartender nodded sagely. My grandmother always said that the best time to fix a mistake is before you make it. The second best time is right now. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. Raised 6 kids on a cleaning lady's salary and still found time to teach us all what matters in life. And what is that? People, sir. At the end of the day, it is always about people. Not money. Not success. Just the people who matter and whether you treated them right. Ethan set down his glass. The wisdom from a college-age bartender should not have hit so hard, but it did. Thank you. Just doing my job, sir. The wisdom is free. Ethan walked away from the bar with new purpose. He scanned the room until he found his mother, now seated at a smaller table, accepting well wishes from a reduced circle of close friends. He approached and bent to speak quietly in her ear. Mother, I need a favor. Victoria looked up at him, reading something in his face that made her expression sharpen. What kind of favor? Dr. Carter. How do I reach her? Not tonight, but properly. Through official channels. His mother was silent for a moment. Then she reached into her clutch and withdrew a small card. Her assistant gave this to me earlier, in case I wanted to discuss further collaboration between our foundations. Ethan took the card. Simple and elegant. Just a name, a title, and a phone number. Dr. Danielle Carter, founder and executive director. The Phoenix Initiative. Thank you. Victoria caught his hand before he could step away. Ethan, whatever you are planning, be careful. That woman has built something extraordinary from nothing. She does not need you to validate it. And if your intentions are anything less than genuine, you will only cause more harm. I know. Do you? Because I have watched you pursue acquisitions with less intensity than you watched her tonight. And people are not companies. You cannot negotiate your way into someone's heart. I am not trying to acquire her, mother. Then what are you trying to do? He looked across the room to where Danielle stood near the exit, her son's hand in hers, preparing to leave. I am trying to find out if I destroyed something worth saving. And if I did, whether there is anything left to rebuild. Victoria studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Then God help you both. She released his hand, and Ethan moved toward the exit. Not running, but not walking slowly either. The purposeful stride of a man who had finally decided on a course of action. He reached the lobby just as Danielle and Martin approached the main doors. A valet was bringing her car around. The evening was ending, and with it, Perhaps his only chance. Danielle. She stopped. Did not turn immediately. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight hesitation before she faced him. Martin looked up at his mother with a question in his eyes. She squeezed his hand reassuringly. Go with Miss Patricia to the car, sweetheart. I will be right there. The boy looked at Ethan, then back at his mother. Whatever he saw in her face seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded and followed his caretaker out the doors. Only then did Danielle turn. You are persistent. I will give you that. I learned it from building a company. The difference between success and failure is often just refusing to stop. And you think that applies here? I think that I made the biggest mistake of my life 8 years ago, and I have spent every day since pretending it did not matter. Tonight proved that it does. Danielle crossed her arms. A defensive gesture, but her eyes held curiosity despite herself. What exactly do you want, Ethan? Absolution. A second chance? Some kind of fairy tale ending where everything works out because the rich man finally realized what he lost. I want coffee. The mundane request caught her off guard. Coffee. Yes, coffee. A conversation somewhere neutral. No cameras, no audiences, no past or future. Just two people who used to know each other, trying to figure out who they are now. That is remarkably humble for a man used to getting everything he wants. I do not want to get anything. I want to earn something. There is a difference. Danielle uncrossed her arms. Something in her stance relaxed, though her guard remained firmly in place. One coffee. Tomorrow afternoon. There is a cafe called the Reading Room on Maple Street. 3 o'clock. If you are even 5 minutes late, I leave and we never speak again. I will be there at 2:30. The corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Do not make me regret this. She turned and walked out the doors without looking back. Ethan watched her go, watched her approach the waiting car, watched her help Martin into the back seat with the easy grace of experienced motherhood. The car pulled away, and Ethan stood in the empty lobby, feeling something he had not felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, possibly foolish hope. He pulled out his phone and canceled every meeting he had scheduled for the next day. His assistant would have questions. His board would have concerns. His carefully managed empire would wobble slightly in his absence. None of it mattered. For the first time in 8 years, Ethan Walker had something more important than business to attend to. The drive home was quiet. Ethan dismissed his driver at the gate and walked the rest of the way to his front door, preferring the night air and the solitude of his thoughts. His house was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Glass walls, clean lines, art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything carefully curated to project success, taste, and control. Tonight, it felt hollow. He walked through rooms that interior designers had praised and magazines had featured, seeing them suddenly through different eyes. There were no family photographs, no children's drawings on the refrigerator, no evidence that anyone lived here rather than simply occupied space. This was not a home. It was a showroom, a monument to a life built on the wrong foundations. Ethan poured himself a drink and sat in his study, the same room where he had made countless deals that shaped industries and influenced markets. The leather chair was comfortable. The desk was antique. The view through the window showcased a garden maintained by staff he rarely spoke to. He pulled out the card his mother had given him and stared at it. Dr. Danielle Carter. The Phoenix Initiative. The Phoenix. Rising from ashes. Rebirth from destruction. The symbolism was not lost on him. 8 years ago, he had destroyed something precious. He had walked away from a woman who loved him because she did not fit his 5-year plan. He had treated her like an obstacle rather than a partner. He had chosen glass towers and stock portfolios over warmth and connection. And she had risen from those ashes, built something meaningful, become someone extraordinary, while he had become exactly what he planned to be: rich, powerful, successful, and utterly alone. The irony was almost poetic. He thought about Martin, the boy with the intelligent eyes and the serious face, the child who called Danielle mom and looked at her like she hung the stars. Was he Ethan's son? The timing worked. If Danielle had been pregnant when they separated, if she had discovered it after he ended things, the child would be about 7 years old. The right age, the right circumstances. But why had she not told him? He tried to imagine it from her perspective. A woman just rejected. A woman told she was just a distraction. A woman watching the man she loved choose money over her. Would she have gone crawling back to share news of a pregnancy? Would she have trusted him with something so precious after he had proven himself untrustworthy with her heart? No. She would have protected her child from the same rejection she experienced. She would have built a wall so high that even the possibility of his indifference could not touch her baby. It was exactly what he would have done, and he hated that he understood it so completely. Ethan finished his drink and set down the glass. Tomorrow, he would have coffee with the woman he once loved. He would sit across from her in a public cafe and try to have a conversation that should have happened years ago. He had no script for this, no strategy, no carefully prepared talking points. For once in his adult life, he would have to operate on instinct and hope it was enough. Sleep came slowly that night, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of small hands and intelligent eyes and a woman walking away in a green dress that flowed like water. Morning arrived with the cruel efficiency of sunlight through glass walls. Ethan had barely slept, but he felt more alert than he had in months. Purpose had that effect. It sharpened everything. He dressed carefully, not in his usual power suits, but something softer, less intimidating. A simple sweater and slacks. The kind of outfit a normal person might wear to meet someone for coffee. He arrived at the reading room at 2:15. Early, as promised. The cafe was exactly what its name suggested. Bookshelves lined the walls. Comfortable chairs clustered around small tables. The air smelled of coffee and old paper, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was the kind of place Danielle would love. He knew that instinctively. Knew that she had chosen it not just for neutrality, but because this was her territory. Her comfort zone. A subtle reminder that she held the power in this meeting. He ordered a black coffee and selected a table near the window. The streets outside were busy with afternoon traffic. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that inside this quiet cafe, a man was about to face the consequences of his past. At exactly 3 o'clock, the door opened. Danielle walked in wearing jeans and a simple white blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. No makeup that he could detect. She looked younger than she had the night before, and somehow more real. She spotted him immediately, crossed the room, and sat down across from him without ceremony. "You are early." "I said I would be." Most men say a lot of things. A waitress approached, and Danielle ordered green tea. When they were alone again, she folded her hands on the table and looked at him with that direct gaze he remembered so well. "So, talk." Ethan had prepared nothing, and somehow that made the words come easier. "I do not know where to start. The beginning is traditional. The beginning was meeting you at that charity gala 9 years ago. You were wearing a blue dress and arguing with a donor about the ethics of conditional philanthropy. You remember what I was wearing? I remember everything about that night. The way you challenged him without being aggressive. The way you made your points with logic and passion in equal measure. I had never met anyone like you." Danielle's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "And then you introduced yourself. The youngest CEO in Walker Industries history. I was not impressed." "I know. That was what attracted me." "So you admit it was about ego." "At first. Everything was about ego at first. But somewhere along the way, it became about you. About us. About the way I felt when I was with you. And yet you ended it." "I did. Why?" The question was simple. The answer was not. Ethan took a breath. "Because I was afraid." "Of what?" "Commitment? Responsibility? Actual human connection? Of not being enough." The words surprised both of them. Danielle's composure cracked slightly. "What? You were already remarkable when I met you. Brilliant. Passionate. Destined for great things. And I was just a man with money and a legacy to maintain. I told myself I was choosing my career over you. But the truth is, I was choosing the only thing I knew I could control. You thought I would outgrow you. I thought you would realize you deserved better. And instead of waiting for that inevitable rejection, I ended things first. I convinced myself it was about ambition, but it was cowardice dressed in a better suit." Silence stretched between them. The cafe's gentle noise filled the space, but it might as well have been a vacuum for all they noticed. Finally, Danielle spoke. "Do you know what I thought when you ended things?" "Tell me." "I thought I had failed. I spent months replaying every conversation, every moment, looking for where I went wrong. What I should have done differently to make you stay." "Danielle, let me finish." Her voice was firm. "I blamed myself for not being enough, for not fitting into the life you wanted. It took me years to realize that the failure was not mine, that I had given everything I had, and the problem was that you were not capable of receiving it." Ethan felt each word like a wound. "You are right. I know I am right. But knowing it intellectually and feeling it emotionally are different things. The scars do not disappear just because you understand how you got them. I am sorry. Sorry is a word, Ethan. It does not undo anything. I know, but it is the only place I can start." Danielle studied him for a long moment. The waitress brought her tea, and she wrapped her hands around the cup as if drawing warmth from it. Why now, she asked. Why, after 8 years, do you suddenly want to have this conversation? Because seeing you last night reminded me what I have been missing, what I have been pretending I do not need. You stood on that stage, powerful and accomplished and completely whole, and I realized that I have spent nearly a decade building an empire that means nothing. Your empire means something to your shareholders, but not to me. Not anymore. Not when I compare what I have achieved to what I gave away. I am not something you gave away, Ethan. I am not a possession you misplaced. I am a person who moved on, who built a life, who learned to thrive without the man who told her she was a distraction. I know, and that makes it worse. Because you did not just survive. You flourished. You proved that everything I feared was wrong. You did not need me to be successful or happy or fulfilled. You only needed the chance to become who you were meant to be. Danielle set down her cup. Her hands were steady, but her eyes held something complex. What do you want from this conversation, Ethan? From me? Because if you are looking for absolution, I cannot give it. If you are looking for a second chance at romance, I cannot offer that either. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. I know. I am not asking for any of that. Then what are you asking for? Ethan leaned forward. This was the moment. The question he had been circling since the night before. I am asking about Martin. Danielle's expression shuddered instantly. The openness that had briefly emerged vanished behind a wall of maternal protection. He is not your concern. He could be my son. He is my son. That is the only relevant fact. Danielle, please. I am not trying to threaten you or take anything from you. I just need to know, does that child share my blood? The silence that followed was deafening. Danielle looked out the window at the street beyond. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, controlled, but beneath it, Ethan could hear the tremor of suppressed emotion. When you ended things, I was already 2 weeks late. I thought it was stress. We had been arguing more. The relationship was struggling. It did not occur to me that there might be another reason. Ethan's heart stopped. I found out a month after you left. I was alone in a bathroom in my tiny apartment, staring at a plastic stick, trying to understand how my life had just transformed completely. Why did you not tell me? Tell you what? That the woman you called a distraction was now carrying your child? That the complication you removed from your life had just become permanent? Her voice cracked slightly, and she paused to compose herself. I sat with that phone in my hand for hours, Ethan. Hours. Trying to decide whether to call you. Whether you deserved to know. Whether telling you would change anything. And you decided not to. I decided that a man who could not love me would not be capable of loving my child. I decided that subjecting Martin to a father who saw him as an inconvenience was crueler than raising him without a father at all. I decided that we deserved better than whatever fraction of yourself you might offer if obligation forced your hand. Tears were forming in her eyes now, but she refused to let them fall. So yes, Ethan, Martin is your biological son. He has your eyes, your jaw, your stubbornness when he wants something. But he is not your son in any way that matters. He does not know you. He does not need you. And I will not allow you to disrupt his life because you suddenly developed a conscience. Ethan sat in stunned silence. He had suspected. From the moment he saw the boy, some part of him had known. But hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. Something that rearranged the furniture in his soul. He had a son. A 7-year-old boy with intelligent eyes and chocolate-smeared cheeks, and a mother who had protected him from the very man who helped create him. Everything clicked into place. Danielle's coldness. Her walls. Her refusal to give him easy answers. She was not punishing him. She was protecting her child. Their child. I do not know what to say, he admitted. There is nothing to say. The situation is what it is. I told you the truth because you asked and because you were willing to sit across from me and show actual vulnerability for once. But the truth does not change anything. It changes everything. For you, maybe. Not for Martin. He has a mother who loves him. A stable home. A good school. Friends. A life that is complete without a father who might disappear when things get difficult. I would never. You already did. You disappeared from my life the moment something better called. What guarantee do I have that you would not do the same to him? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Because she was right. He had disappeared. He had chosen convenience over commitment. He had proven, through action rather than words, exactly the kind of man he was. And now he wanted to be different. But wanting was not the same as being. Danielle gathered her purse and stood. I need to go. Patricia is watching Martin, and I promised him we would go to the park before dinner. Can we talk again? She looked down at him with an expression that was not quite compassion, but was no longer hostility either. I do not know. I need to think. Tonight, I need to be a mother, not the keeper of your emotional reckoning. I understand. Do you? Because understanding is not just words, Ethan. It is actions. It is respecting boundaries. It is accepting that you do not get to rush this process just because you are suddenly ready. I will wait. As long as it takes. We will see. She turned and walked toward the door. Halfway there, she paused and looked back. For what it is worth, you are not the same man who broke up with me 8 years ago. Something in you has shifted. I do not know if it is enough, but I see it. Then she was gone, and Ethan was alone with his cold coffee and the shattered pieces of everything he thought he knew about his life. Outside the window, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent. Normal people continued their normal lives, unaware that inside this quiet cafe, a man had just discovered he was a father. A father who had missed 7 years of his son's life. A father who had everything except the only thing that mattered. Ethan remained at the table until the cafe closed, thinking about glass towers and broken promises and a little boy with his eyes who did not know he existed. When he finally walked out into the evening air, he felt different, hollowed out and filled up at the same time. He had a son, and now he had to figure out how to become the kind of man who deserved to know him. If you have made it this far in the story, you are clearly invested. Drop a comment and let me know what you think Ethan should do next. Should he fight for his son? Should he respect Danielle's boundaries? And make sure you are subscribed because this story is going to break your heart and put it back together again. The days that followed were the longest of Ethan's life. He went through the motions of his existence. Board meetings, conference calls, decisions worth millions that should have demanded his full attention. But his mind was elsewhere, always elsewhere, circling back to a cafe on Maple Street and a woman who held his future in her hands without even trying. He did not call Danielle, did not text, did not send flowers or gifts or any of the gestures that money could buy, but sincerity could not. She had asked for space, and for perhaps the first time in his adult life, Ethan Walker chose to respect a boundary rather than bulldoze through it. It was harder than any negotiation he had ever faced. His mother noticed the change. She visited his office 3 days after the ceremony, settling into the chair across from his desk with the regal posture of a woman who had never apologized for taking up space. "You look terrible," she said. "Thank you, Mother. Always a pleasure. I am serious. When did you last sleep properly? Eat something that was not delivered to your desk." Ethan set down the report he had been pretending to read. "I have had a lot on my mind. The Carter woman. It was not a question. Her name is Danielle. And yes, Victoria studied her son with the penetrating gaze that had always made him feel like a child caught misbehaving. Tell me." So he did. He told her everything. The conversation at the ceremony. The coffee meeting. The truth about Martin. The 7 years of fatherhood he had missed because he was too arrogant to see what he was throwing away. When he finished, Victoria was silent for a long moment. The clock on his wall ticked steadily, marking seconds that felt like hours. "You were always my most difficult child," she said finally. "I am your only child." "Exactly. All my difficulty concentrated in one person." She leaned forward. "Ethan, I am going to tell you something, and I need you to actually listen. Not the way you listen in meetings, already formulating your response. Really listen. I am listening. When your father died, you were 16 years old. Old enough to understand loss, young enough for it to shape you in ways you could not control. I watched you build walls after that. Watched you decide that if you could not prevent people from leaving, you would leave first. Control the narrative. Protect yourself." Ethan felt his throat tighten. They rarely spoke about his father. The wound had scarred over, but never truly healed. "It served you well in business," Victoria continued. "That emotional distance. That ability to make hard decisions without sentiment clouding your judgment. But it destroyed you in love. Every woman you dated was kept at arm's length. Every relationship was temporary by design. And Danielle, that poor girl loved you with everything she had, and you repaid her by treating her heart like a liability on a balance sheet. I know. Do you? Because knowing and understanding are different things. You knew what you did was wrong even as you did it. But you did not understand why until she stood on that stage, successful and whole and utterly beyond your reach." Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city that bore so much of the Walker family's fingerprints. "You have a son, Ethan. A child who carries your blood and probably your stubbornness. That is not something you can negotiate or acquire or schedule into your calendar. It is a responsibility that requires you to become a different kind of man. I want to be that man. Wanting is easy. Being is hard. She turned to face him. You cannot rush this. You cannot use your resources or your influence to force your way into that child's life. If Danielle decides you are worthy of knowing your son, it will be because you earned it, not because you demanded it. How do I earn it? By becoming someone worth knowing. By proving, through consistent action over time, that you are capable of putting someone else's needs before your own. By being patient when every instinct tells you to push. She crossed back to the desk and placed her hand on his cheek. A rare gesture of maternal tenderness. I love you, Ethan, but I also see you clearly. And right now, you are not ready to be anyone's father. You are too focused on what you want, what you lost, what you might gain. Until you can focus entirely on what that child needs, you will only cause harm. What if she never gives me a chance? Then you will have to accept that. Some consequences cannot be reversed. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. If this is one of those situations, you will need to find peace with it. She gathered her purse and moved toward the door. But, she added, pausing at the threshold, I have met Danielle Carter. Spoken with her about her work. There is no cruelty in that woman, only caution. She did not refuse you outright. She asked for time. Give her time. And use that time to become worthy of the trust she is not yet ready to give. Victoria left, and Ethan sat alone in his office, her words echoing in the silence. Become worthy. It sounded simple. It was anything but. 2 weeks passed. Ethan threw himself into something he had never truly attempted before. Self-improvement that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share. He started seeing a therapist, a recommendation from a colleague whose own marriage had nearly ended before counseling saved it. The first session was awkward. The second was painful. By the third, Ethan was beginning to understand just how much work lay ahead. You describe yourself in terms of achievement, the therapist observed. Net worth, acquisitions, and career milestones. But when I ask about relationships, about emotional experiences, you become vague, distant. I'm not good at that kind of thing. That is not a fixed trait. It is a skill you never developed because you chose to develop others instead. The question is whether you are willing to learn now. I am willing. Why? Be specific. Ethan thought about Martin. The serious little face. The intelligent eyes. The complete absence of any connection between them. Because I have a son who does not know me. And if I ever want the chance to be part of his life, I need to become the kind of person who can offer him something real. Not just money or resources. Something that actually matters. The therapist nodded slowly. That is a good reason. Hold on to it when the work gets hard. It got hard quickly. The therapist pushed him to examine patterns he had never questioned. His relationship with his late father. His fear of vulnerability. His tendency to use achievement as a substitute for connection. Each session peeled back another layer, revealing wounds he had spent decades pretending did not exist. He also started doing something even more uncomfortable. Listening. At his company, he began actually hearing what his employees said instead of waiting for them to finish so he could issue directives. He asked questions about their lives, their families, their concerns. At first, they were suspicious. Ethan Walker did not make small talk. Ethan Walker made demands. But slowly, tentatively, something shifted. His assistant, Marcus, mentioned that his daughter had a dance recital coming up. Ethan cleared the man's schedule for that afternoon without being asked. A department head confided that her mother was ill, and Ethan arranged for flexible hours and additional support without making it about productivity. Small gestures, meaningless by themselves, but they began to reshape how he moved through the world. He was learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to see other people as people rather than instruments of his ambition. 3 weeks after the cafe meeting, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost ignored it. He was in the middle of reviewing a contract, and calls from unfamiliar numbers were usually filtered by his assistant. But something made him answer. Ethan Walker. It is Danielle. His heart stopped, restarted, pounding against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Danielle, I was not expecting to hear from you. I was not expecting to call. But something happened, and I thought you should know. Fear gripped him. Is Martin okay? He is fine. Physically. But he came home from school yesterday asking questions. About his father. Ethan closed his eyes. What did you tell him? The truth. As much as a 7-year-old can understand. That his father is someone I knew a long time ago. That he was not ready to be a dad when he was born. And that it was complicated. How did he take it? He wanted to know if you were a bad person. I told him no. That you were a person who made mistakes, like everyone does. That sometimes adults are not ready for the things life gives them. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Danielle could have painted him as a villain. She had every right to. Instead, she had chosen nuance. Grace, thank you for not making me a monster in his eyes. I do not want him to carry anger he did not earn. That would only hurt him. She paused. But Ethan, his questions are not going to stop. He is getting older. He notices that other kids have fathers at school events. He asks why his situation is different. What are you saying? I am saying that the conversation we started at the cafe is not finished. Whether I like it or not, you are part of his story. And at some point, he is going to want to know that story. The question is whether you will be ready when he asks. I want to be ready. I have been working on myself. Therapy. Learning to be different. I know. The response surprised him. You know? Your mother and I have stayed in touch. She mentioned that you have been making changes. That you seem different since the ceremony. I am trying. Trying is good. But trying is not the same as succeeding. And the stakes are too high for me to gamble my son's well-being on your attempt at self-improvement. I understand. I am not asking for immediate access or rights or anything like that. I am just asking for the chance to prove myself. Whatever that looks like. However long it takes. Silence stretched across the line. When Danielle spoke again, her voice was softer. There is a school event next Friday. A science fair. Martin has been working on his project for weeks. Volcanoes. Very dramatic. He would not think anything of seeing you there since he does not know what you look like. Ethan's pulse quickened. Are you inviting me? I am giving you an opportunity to see him in his element. No pressure. No introductions. Just observation. If you can handle that, maybe we can discuss next steps. I can handle that. We will see. Jefferson Elementary. 4 o'clock. Do not be late, and do not approach him. Just watch. Just see who he is when he is not performing for adults. I will be there. Goodbye, Ethan. The line went dead, and Ethan sat motionless, the contract in front of him completely forgotten. He was going to see his son, really see him, in his natural environment, being himself. The prospect was terrifying in ways that hostile takeovers and market crashes had never been. This was not about money or power or strategy. This was about a child, his child, and the first tentative step towards something he had never dared to hope for. Friday arrived with agonizing slowness. Ethan changed clothes 3 times before settling on something that did not scream billionaire or deadbeat dad. Khakis. A simple blue button-down. Shoes that cost less than most people's monthly rent, but still looked respectable. He wanted to blend in. Be unremarkable. Just another parent at a school event. He arrived at Jefferson Elementary at 3:45. The parking lot was already filling with minivans and SUVs, parents emerging with cameras and supportive smiles. Ethan felt utterly out of place. These people knew things he did not. Bedtime routines and favorite foods, and the names of stuffed animals that provided comfort during thunderstorms. He knew nothing. Inside the gymnasium, tables lined the walls, each displaying a child's interpretation of scientific principles. Solar systems made of painted styrofoam. Experiments about plant growth. Something involving magnets that Ethan did not understand despite having an engineering degree. And then he saw him. Marcus stood beside a volcano constructed from papier-mâché and what appeared to be an impressive amount of glitter. He was wearing a miniature lab coat, clearly homemade, with his name stitched on the pocket. His expression was serious as he explained his project to a passing teacher, pointing at diagrams mounted on a foam board behind him. Ethan hung back near the entrance, watching, just watching. The boy was animated when he talked about his volcano. His hands moved constantly, gesturing toward components and chemical reactions. When the teacher asked a question, Martin considered it carefully before responding, taking the inquiry seriously even though he was 7 years old and covered in glitter. He was smart. That much was obvious. But more than that, he was confident. Not in the arrogant way that Ethan had been confident at that age. In a grounded way. A way that suggested he knew who he was and was comfortable with it. Danielle had done that. Single-handedly raised a child who was secure and articulate and kind to the younger student who wandered over to look at his volcano. She had given Martin everything Ethan's money could have provided and somehow made it worth more through presence and attention and love. Ethan felt the full weight of what he had missed. 7 years of this. 7 years of watching a small person become a slightly larger person. 7 years of questions and discoveries and mundane miracles that he would never get back. His eyes burned, and he had to look away. When he looked back, Danielle was watching him from across the gymnasium. She stood near the refreshment table, a cup of juice in her hand, her expression unreadable. She did not wave or approach, just observed. Ethan nodded slightly. An acknowledgement. A thank you. She returned the nod and looked away. The science fair continued around them. Children demonstrated their projects. Parents applauded. Teachers offered encouraging words. It was all so normal. So beautifully, achingly normal. Ethan stayed for an hour. He watched Martin win a third-place ribbon and beam with pride. Watched him accept congratulations from classmates and high-fives from friends. Watched Danielle kneel beside him, straighten his lab coat, and say something that made him laugh with pure, uncomplicated joy. This was what family looked like. Not transactions, or obligations, or strategic alliances. Just people who loved each other, showing up and being present. Ethan wanted it so badly that it physically hurt. When the crowd began to thin, he slipped out before anyone could notice him. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process emotions he had spent a lifetime avoiding. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You stayed. That is more than I expected." He typed back carefully. "He is remarkable. You did an amazing job." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Saturday. Same cafe. 10 in the morning. "We should talk about what happens next." Ethan read the message 3 times before responding. "I will be there." He drove home in a daze, his mind full of glitter and volcanoes and the sound of a child's laughter. Drop a comment right now and tell me what you think Danielle is going to say at this meeting. Is she going to give Ethan a chance? And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time because this story is about to change everything. Saturday morning was gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made coffee shops feel like sanctuaries. Ethan arrived at the reading room early, claimed the same table by the window, and waited. Danielle appeared at 10 exactly. She was dressed casually again, jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She carried a folder under her arm, which immediately made Ethan nervous. She sat down, ordered her green tea, and placed the folder on the table between them. "Before we begin," she said, "I need you to understand something. This is not a negotiation. I am not looking for concessions or compromises or terms that favor one side over another. This is a conversation about my son's welfare. Period. I understand. Good. Because what I am about to propose is going to require you to accept limitations that you are probably not used to accepting." Ethan straightened in his chair. "I am listening." Danielle opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. "I have spent the past week consulting with child psychologists, family therapists, and my own attorney. I wanted to understand the best way to handle this situation for Martin's sake. That is thorough. That is parenting. When you are the only one responsible for a child's well-being, you learn to cover every angle." She tapped the first document. "This is a proposed introduction timeline. Gradual exposure over several months, starting with you as a friend of the family, eventually progressing to discussions about your actual relationship." Ethan scanned the document. It was detailed, methodical, designed to minimize disruption to Martin's sense of stability. "I can work with this. There is more." She pointed to the second document. "This outlines expectations for your behavior during the introduction period. No extravagant gifts. No attempts to win his affection through material means. No promises you cannot keep. No discussions about our history or why you were not present for his early years. You want me to let him lead the relationship. I want you to earn his trust naturally. Not buy it. Not rush it. If he decides he does not like you, that is his right. You do not get to override his feelings just because you share genetics." Ethan nodded slowly. "What about the legal aspects?" Danielle's expression tightened slightly. "That is the third document. I am not asking you to sign away your parental rights, and I am not asking for child support. I have managed fine on my own, and I will continue to do so. What I am asking for is a voluntary agreement that any decisions about Martin's welfare are made jointly, but with my final say in cases of disagreement. You want veto power. I want protection. For 7 years, I have been his only parent. I know him better than anyone. If we disagree about something significant, I need to know that my judgment will be respected." It was a reasonable request. Any court would likely grant her similar authority given the circumstances. But Ethan could feel the weight of what she was really asking. She was asking him to trust her more than he trusted himself. "Okay," he said. Danielle blinked. "Okay, just like that. You have earned the right to make these decisions. I have not. If becoming part of Martin's life means accepting that you know better than I do, then I accept it." She stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. You really have changed. I am trying to. Every day. It is the hardest thing I have ever done, and I am probably failing more than I am succeeding. But for the first time in my life, I am trying to be better instead of just being successful. Danielle gathered the documents back into the folder. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. The Ethan I knew would have hired lawyers, demanded rights, tried to control the situation through force and resources. The Ethan you knew was terrified of anything he could not control. He thought that if he held everything tightly enough, nothing could hurt him. Ethan paused. He was wrong. He just ended up hurting everyone else instead. Silence fell between them. The cafe hummed with quiet conversations and clinking cups. Outside, the drizzle had become actual rain, streaking the windows with silver tears. I need to ask you something, Danielle said finally. And I need you to answer honestly, even if the answer is painful. Anything. When you ended things between us, when you said I was a distraction from your ambitions, did you mean it? Or were you just scared? Ethan considered the question carefully. It deserved more than a reflexive response. Both. I was scared, so I convinced myself I meant it. I told myself that love was weakness, that relationships were obstacles, that the only thing worth pursuing was success. It was easier to believe that than to admit I was running away from the one thing I actually wanted. And what was that? You. A life with you. A future that was not measured in stock prices and acquisition targets. Danielle's eyes glistened. She looked away, blinking rapidly. Do you know what the worst part was? She asked, her voice thick. It was not the rejection. I could have survived that. It was the certainty, the absolute conviction in your voice when you said I did not fit into your plans. You were so sure. And if you were that sure about leaving me, then maybe I was not worth staying for. You were worth everything. I was just too blind to see it. I know that now. It took years of therapy and self-work and building something meaningful with my own hands. But for a long time, I believed you. I believed I was not enough. I am sorry. Those 2 words are insufficient, but they are all I have. They are not all you have. You have actions. You have the chance to be different with Martin than you were with me. That is what matters now, not the past. The future. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close. An opening. A possibility. What happens next? He asked. Danielle wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders, composing herself with visible effort. Next Sunday, there is a birthday party for one of Martin's classmates. It is at a park. Casual. Lots of parents around. I thought it might be a good opportunity for you to be in the same space as him again. Maybe exchange a few words. Nothing significant. Just presence. I would like that. It is a start. That is all I can promise right now. A start. A start is more than I deserve. Danielle gathered her folder and stood. But she did not move toward the door immediately. Instead, she looked down at Ethan with an expression that was complicated and layered and impossible to fully read. I do not hate you, she said quietly. I thought I did for a long time. But hate requires energy, and I needed all my energy for Martin. Somewhere along the way, the hate faded, and what was left was just sadness for what could have been. I feel that too. Every day since the ceremony. Good. Hold on to that feeling. Let it motivate you to be better. Because if you let Martin down the way you let me down, I will not give you another chance. This is it, Ethan. Your one opportunity to get it right. I will not waste it. She nodded once, turned, and walked out into the rain. Ethan remained at the table for a long time, watching the water stream down the windows and thinking about second chances and the courage it took to offer them. The birthday party was held at Riverside Park, a sprawling green space with playgrounds and picnic areas and enough room for 24 7-year-olds to run screaming in all directions. Ethan arrived in his deliberately modest outfit, feeling conspicuous despite his efforts to blend in. Balloons tied to a pavilion marked the party's location. Parents clustered in groups, chatting and watching their children with the practiced vigilance of people accustomed to chaos. He spotted Danielle near the snack table, arranging cupcakes and keeping one eye on Martin, who was engaged in an intense game of tag with several other children. She noticed him approaching and nodded subtly. He took a position nearby, close enough to observe, but far enough to avoid seeming intrusive. For the first hour, nothing significant happened. Ethan watched. He learned that Martin was faster than most of his classmates, that he made sure slower kids got a chance to catch up before darting away again, that he shared his snacks without being asked and high-fived the birthday boy with genuine enthusiasm. He was kind. That was what struck Ethan most. In a world that rewarded cutthroat competition, Danielle had raised a child who defaulted to kindness. How had she done it? How had she instilled those values while also building an international organization and traveling the world and handling the thousand responsibilities of single parenthood? Ethan did not know, but he intended to find out. Midway through the party, Martin broke away from his friends to get a juice box. The snack table was near where Ethan was standing. Their paths would inevitably cross. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Martin grabbed a juice box, struggled briefly with the straw, then looked up and noticed the tall man watching him. "Hi," Martin said with the unself-conscious openness of childhood. "Hi," Ethan managed. "Are you somebody's dad?" The question hit like a physical blow. Ethan forced himself to breathe. "I am. But my kid is not here right now." "Oh, that is too bad. This party is really fun. There is cake later." "So I heard." Martin succeeded in puncturing his juice box and took a satisfied sip. "My mom says cake is for special occasions. She says every day should feel special, but some days get extra sugar." "Your mom sounds wise." She is. She is the smartest person I know. She helped me with my volcano project. Did you see it? I got 3rd place." Ethan smiled despite himself. "I did see it, actually. It was impressive." Martin beamed. "Thanks. I wanted 1st place, but Lucy's project about butterflies was really good. She had real chrysalises. You cannot compete with real chrysalises." A gracious attitude toward competition. Also impressive. The boy studied Ethan with sudden curiosity. "You talk like a grown-up. Not in a boring way. In a big words way. I have been told that before. My mom talks like that too sometimes. When she is being serious about important things." Martin cocked his head. "You seem familiar. Have we met before?" Ethan's throat constricted. "I do not think so. Maybe I just have one of those faces. Maybe. Well, I have to get back to tag. It was nice meeting you, mister." "It was nice meeting you too, Martin." The boy froze. "How do you know my name?" Ethan realized his mistake instantly. Cold panic flooded his system. "Your mom mentioned it earlier. When I arrived." Marcus considered this, then shrugged. "Okay, but." He darted off to rejoin his friends, juice box clutched in one hand, completely untroubled by the encounter. Ethan released a breath he had not realized he was holding. That had been close. Too close. He looked over at Danielle and saw her watching with a mixture of amusement and concern. Later, after the cake was served and the presents were opened, Danielle found a moment to approach him. "You talked to him." "He talked to me. I tried to keep it brief." "You almost slipped up with his name." "I know. I am sorry." She shook her head slightly. "Actually, I am glad it happened. You recovered well. And more importantly, you did not push. You let him control the conversation. That is exactly what I needed to see. What happens now? Now we keep going. Slow and steady. More events like this. More casual encounters. Eventually, when the time is right, I will tell him who you are." "When will that be?" "When I feel like he is ready. When I feel like you are ready. It could be weeks. It could be months. I cannot give you a timeline." "I understand." Danielle looked out at the playground, where Martin was now attempting to climb a structure that seemed slightly too advanced for his age. She watched with the quiet tension of a mother who wanted to intervene but was forcing herself to let him try. "He is going to fall," Ethan observed. "Probably. He usually does. Then he gets back up and tries again. Stubborn. Determined. There is a difference." Martin reached the top of the structure and raised his arms in triumph. Danielle's face softened into a smile. "He gets that from you, you know. That refusal to quit. I used to see it in you when you talked about your goals. That fire. I channeled it into the wrong things. Maybe. Or maybe you just did not know what the right things were yet." She turned to face him. "I am going to say something, and I want you to really hear it. Not just register the words, but actually internalize them. Okay. You are not too late, Ethan. I know it feels that way. I know 7 years seems like an unbridgeable gap. But Martin is young. He has his whole life ahead of him. If you commit to being present, really present, there is still time to build something meaningful." Ethan felt his eyes sting. "I want to. More than I have ever wanted anything." "Then prove it. Not with grand gestures or financial support or any of the things that come easily to you. Prove it by showing up. Again and again. Even when it is boring. Even when it is hard. Even when you have 1,000 other places you could be. I will. We will see." She walked away to rescue Martin from his climbing structure, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and a heart that felt more open than it had in years. The months that followed were a lesson in patience. Ethan attended every event Danielle allowed him to attend. Soccer games where Martin spent more time picking dandelions than chasing the ball. School plays where his son delivered 3 lines with tremendous conviction and then waved enthusiastically at his mother from the stage. Science museum trips where Martin asked questions so rapidly that the tour guide eventually gave up and just followed his lead. Each encounter was brief. A few words exchanged. A shared observation about dinosaurs or planets or the injustice of bedtime. Ethan learned to exist in the margins of his son's life, present but not intrusive, available but not demanding. It was the opposite of everything he had ever known about being successful. In business, you pushed. You asserted. You made things happen through force of will. In fatherhood, at least this tentative version of it, you waited. You observed. You earned trust one small moment at a time. His therapy sessions intensified as he processed the experience. The therapist helped him recognize patterns. The desire to accelerate things. The fear that Danielle would change her mind. The grief for years he could not recover. You are mourning, the therapist observed during one session. That is healthy. You lost something real, even if you did not realize it at the time. Let yourself feel that loss instead of rushing to fix it. I'm not good at feeling things. That is precisely why you need to practice. So he practiced. He sat with difficult emotions instead of burying them in work. He allowed himself to cry alone in his empty house. He wrote letters to Martin that he would never send, pouring out years of regret and hope onto paper. And slowly, incrementally, he began to change. The transformation was not dramatic or sudden. It was quiet, internal, a shifting of priorities that manifested in small choices. Leaving work early to attend a soccer game instead of staying late for a meeting. Calling his mother just to talk instead of only when business required it. Noticing the people around him as people rather than obstacles or instruments. Danielle noticed too. He could see it in the way her posture relaxed around him over time. The way her smiles became less guarded. The way she started sharing small stories about Martin without being asked. He asked about you last week, she mentioned casually after a school concert. Ethan's heart skipped. What did he say? He wanted to know why the tall man who talks like a grown-up keeps coming to his events. He thinks you might be a spy. A spy. He is 7. Everything is spies or dinosaurs or some combination of both. What did you tell him? I told him you were a friend of mine, that you were getting to know our family. How did he take it? He asked if you would come to his birthday party. It is next month. Ethan's breath caught. His birthday? I told him I would think about it. But I wanted to ask you first. It would be a bigger commitment than casual encounters. You would be there for hours, interacting with him directly. It would be harder to maintain distance. I want to be there, if you will let me. Danielle studied him for a long moment, searching for something in his face. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. Okay, you can come. That single word, okay, felt more significant than any business deal Ethan had ever closed. Martin's 8th birthday party was held at an indoor trampoline park, because apparently that was what children wanted now instead of reasonable celebrations that did not involve adults attempting acrobatics they were far too old for. Ethan arrived with a gift carefully chosen to comply with Danielle's rules. A book about volcanoes from a science museum, educational but fun, interesting without being extravagant. He had spent more time selecting it than he had spent on most corporate acquisitions. Martin spotted him immediately. Hey, it is the spy. Several parents looked over in confusion. Ethan waved awkwardly. Hi, Martin. Happy birthday. Thanks. My mom said you were coming. Are you really a spy? Jack's dad says spies are not real, but I think he is wrong because how would he even know if they were that good at spying? The logic was oddly compelling. I'm not a spy, but I appreciate your open-minded approach to the possibility. Martin grinned. You do talk funny. I like it. Do you want to jump on trampolines with me? The big kids section is the best, but you have to be careful because Tommy's dad pulled a muscle last time and made a really weird noise. Ethan looked at Danielle, who was watching from across the room with an expression of barely suppressed amusement. She nodded almost imperceptibly. Sure, let us jump on trampolines. What followed was the most undignified hour of Ethan Walker's life. He bounced. He stumbled. He launched himself into foam pits and emerged covered in static charge material. He attempted a flip at Martin's enthusiastic urging and landed so poorly that the safety attendant came over to check on him. And through it all, Martin laughed. Not at him, but with him. The pure, uncomplicated laughter of a child who was simply having fun. You are really bad at this, Martin declared gleefully. I am aware. But you keep trying anyway. That is what matters. My mom says effort counts more than results. Your mom is right about most things. Martin considered this. She is. But do not tell her I said that. She will get a big head. Your secret is safe with me. They took a break for cake and presents. Martin tore through wrapping paper with the ferocity of a child who had been waiting for this moment all year. When he reached Ethan's gift, he paused. This is from you. It is. Marcus opened the book and his eyes went wide. Volcanoes. There is a whole chapter about supervolcanoes. Did you know Yellowstone is actually a supervolcano, and if it erupted it could cover most of the United States in ash? I did not know that. It is terrifying. I love it. He threw his arms around Ethan in a spontaneous hug, the kind that children give without self-consciousness or reservation. Ethan froze for a moment, then carefully returned the embrace. Over Martin's shoulder, he saw Danielle watching. Her eyes were glistening. The party ended. Parents collected exhausted children. Thank you notes were promised. Ethan helped clean up without being asked, disposing of plates and gathering stray balloons like it was the most natural thing in the world. When everything was done, Danielle approached him. He had a good time. I did too. Despite the muscle, I am fairly certain I pulled attempting that ill-advised flip. She smiled. It was the most genuine smile she had given him in all these months. Ethan, I need to talk to you about something. Not here. Somewhere private. The words sent a jolt of anxiety through him. Is everything okay? Yes, but it is important. Can you meet me tomorrow? Same cafe. Noon. Of course. Good. And Ethan? She touched his arm briefly. Thank you. For today. For all of it. She walked away to collect Martin, and Ethan was left with the strange sensation that everything was about to change. The cafe was quiet when Ethan arrived at noon the next day. Danielle was already there, sitting at their usual table, no folder this time. Just her, a cup of tea, and an expression that was somehow both nervous and resolute. He sat down across from her. What is this about? Danielle took a breath. I have been thinking a lot. About us. About Marcus. About what kind of future is actually possible. And I think it is time to tell him the truth. About who you are. Ethan's heart stopped. Are you serious? I have watched you for months now. Watched how you are with him. How patient you have been. How you have put his needs above your own ego. That is not something I ever expected from you. But you have shown me, consistently, that you are capable of change. I have been trying. I know. And I think Martin is ready. He adores you already. You are his favorite adult who is not me, which is saying something because he is very particular about people. He asks about you constantly. Wants to know when you are coming to the next event. Wonders why you do not visit more often. Ethan felt tears threatening. What exactly are you proposing? I am proposing that we sit down with him together. This weekend. And explain, in age-appropriate terms, that you are his father. That you were not around before because of complicated adult reasons. But that you are here now and you want to be part of his life. What if he is angry? What if he hates me for not being there? He might be angry. He might have questions that are hard to answer. But he is also kind and forgiving and incredibly resilient. I have prepared him for this as much as I can without giving away the secret. He knows his father exists. He knows his father made mistakes. Now he needs to know that his father wants to make things right. Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I do not know what to say. Say you will be there. Saturday, 10 in the morning. My apartment. I will have pancakes ready because difficult conversations are easier with pancakes. I will be there. And Ethan? Danielle reached across the table and took his hand. It was the first time she had voluntarily touched him since they reunited. Whatever happens next, whatever Martin decides he feels, we face it together. You are not alone in this anymore. The words broke something open inside him. Years of isolation, of going through life without true partnership, suddenly lifted. He was not alone. For the first time in 8 years, he was not alone. Thank you, he whispered, for giving me this chance. I do not deserve it. Maybe not. But Martin does. He deserves a father who shows up. And against all my expectations, you have become that person. They sat in silence for a moment, hands joined across the table, two people who had hurt each other finding their way towards something new. What about us? Ethan asked finally. I know this is about Martin, but I need to know. Is there any possibility for us? Or is that door closed forever? Danielle was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. I do not know. I spent years healing from what you did. I built walls to protect myself. I am not sure I am capable of taking them down, even if I wanted to. I understand. But, she continued, I am also not the same person I was 8 years ago. Neither are you. Maybe, with time, with continued proof that you have really changed, maybe something could grow again. I cannot promise anything. I can only say that I am open to the possibility in a way I never thought I would be. That is more than enough. For now, let us focus on Martin. Let us get through Saturday. After that, we can figure out what comes next. Ethan nodded. One step at a time. It was the only way forward. Saturday arrived with the terrifying slowness of a day that would change everything. Ethan stood outside Danielle's apartment building, a bouquet of flowers in one hand and the volcano book Martin had loved clutched in the other as a kind of talisman. He had slept maybe 2 hours the night before. Every possible scenario had played through his mind. Acceptance, rejection, anger, confusion. He was prepared for all of them, and none of them. Danielle buzzed him up. When he entered the apartment, he found it warm and lived in, full of children's artwork and books and the comfortable clutter of a home where people actually spent time together. Martin was sitting at the kitchen table, working on what appeared to be a drawing of a dinosaur fighting a volcano. Hey, it is you. Martin looked up with a delighted grin. Mom said you were coming for pancakes. Did you know she makes the best pancakes? They have chocolate chips in them. I did not know that, but I am looking forward to finding out. Danielle gestured for Ethan to sit. The pancakes were indeed excellent. Martin chatted throughout the meal about school, about his best friend Jack, about a video he had seen of a volcano erupting in Iceland. It was normal, domestic, everything Ethan had never known he wanted until he was sitting in the middle of it. When the plates were cleared, Danielle took a deep breath. Martin, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about something important. The boy looked up, sensing the shift in tone. Am I in trouble? No, baby, not at all. This is good news. Or at least, I hope you will think it is good news. She sat down beside him, and Ethan took a seat across the table. The air felt charged, heavy with significance. You know how you have been asking about your father? Danielle began. Martin nodded slowly, his expression becoming serious. Well, I told you that your father made some mistakes when you were a baby, that he was not ready to be a dad. Do you remember that? Yes. You said he needed to grow up first. That is right. And the thing is, Martin, he has grown up. He has been working really hard to become someone who can be a good father, someone who deserves to know you. Martin looked between his mother and Ethan, the wheels clearly turning in his young mind. Is it him? He asked quietly, pointing at Ethan. Is the spy my dad? Danielle laughed despite herself. He is not a spy, sweetheart. But yes, Ethan is your father. Silence fell over the kitchen. Martin stared at Ethan with an intensity that was almost unsettling in a child so young. You are my dad. Ethan's voice was thick when he answered. Yes, I am. Why did you not come before? The question was simple, without accusation, but it cut deep nonetheless. Because I was scared, Ethan said honestly. Because I did not think I knew how to be a good father. Because I made choices that hurt your mother, and I was ashamed. None of those are good excuses. They are just the truth. Are you still scared? A little bit. But I am more scared of missing any more of your life than I am of trying and failing. Martin considered this for a long moment. His face went through a series of expressions that Ethan could not quite read. Then, abruptly, he stood up from his chair and walked around the table. He stopped in front of Ethan and looked up at him with those intelligent, serious eyes. I am glad you grew up, Martin said. I was worried you might be a bad person. But you are not. You are nice and you talk funny, and you came to all my events even when you did not have to. I wanted to be there. I know. Martin nodded solemnly. That is what matters. Then he stepped forward and hugged Ethan with all the strength his small arms could muster. Ethan wrapped his arms around his son and held on, tears streaming freely down his face. Across the table, Danielle was crying too, watching the scene with an expression of something that looked remarkably like hope. When Martin finally pulled back, he was smiling. Does this mean you will come to more events now? Like, as my actual dad? Every single one you will have me at. Even the boring school assemblies. Especially the boring school assemblies. Martin pumped his fist. Yes. Wait until I tell Jack. He is going to freak out. His dad does not even come to the fun events. He ran off to presumably process this news in the way 7-year-olds processed everything, through physical movement and external narration. Ethan could hear him in the living room, apparently explaining the situation to a stuffed dinosaur. Danielle approached and sat down beside Ethan. That went better than I expected, she admitted. He is incredible. You have raised an incredible person. He makes it easy. Mostly. She paused. So, what now? Ethan looked at her, at the woman who had given him more grace than he deserved, who had protected his son while building an empire of compassion, who had somehow found the strength to let him back in after everything he had done. Now we figure it out together, day by day, whatever that looks like. That sounds manageable. Danielle. He took her hand. I know I cannot undo the past. I know I missed years that I will never get back. But I want you to know that I am going to spend the rest of my life proving that I was worth the second chance. Not just to Martin. To you too. She squeezed his hand. I believe you. Is that forgiveness? It is the beginning of it. From the living room, Martin called out. Mom, can Dad stay for lunch? I want to show him my Lego collection. Mom. Dad. The words hung in the air like a promise. Danielle looked at Ethan, a real smile finally breaking across her face. Well, can you stay for lunch? Ethan smiled back, feeling something he had not felt in years. Maybe decades. I can stay for as long as you will have me. And that, my friends, is how a billionaire CEO walked into his mother's award ceremony expecting champagne and applause, and walked out with something far more valuable. A second chance at the family he never knew he needed. Remember at the beginning of this story, when Ethan grabbed Danielle's arm and demanded to know if Martin was his son. Remember how she walked away without looking back? Now you know what came before that moment, and what came after. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what part resonated with you most. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. And if you have not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you never miss another story from Mr. Grayson. Until next time, remember, the greatest wealth is not measured in dollars. It is measured in the people who show up for you and the courage it takes to show up for them. This has been Love Tales by Mr. Grayson. Take care of each other.